Such a good intro.
That really turned me on when that was ready. I was like,
yes. It's so good. It's so good. So do you say it first?
Yes.
This is what always happens on your podcast too. So
Yes.
Sex positive culture.
It's my body to give.
Are threesome gifts a thing?
Taking a breath.
I like your bed.
Horizontal.
This is Horizontal with Lila.
I'm Lila, and I'm horizontal.
And I'm Bryony, and I'm horizontal with Lila.
Oh, it sounds so good when you say it.
Hey, welcome back to Season 2 of Horizontal, the podcast that makes private conversations public. Or, to paraphrase my listener, Ghostheart, the podcast that takes you into my bed and lets your ears watch as I unzip intimate conversations. We record while the opposite of vertical, wearing robes. It's a thing, the robes. It makes a difference. In this episode, I lie down with Bryony Cole. Bryony's the host of one of my hands-down favorite podcasts, Future of Sex, which explores the intersection of the evolving worlds of sex and tech. Her work grapples with questions like, how will VR affect relationships? Does sex with a humanoid robot constitute cheating? Bryony also moderates live panels with some of the most fascinating innovators and radicals in sexuality and technology. She organizes and hosts sex tech hackathons across the globe, seeding innovation in the field. She's also, I must say, a stunningly gorgeous Australian beach babe, which would be a little difficult to deal with if she wasn't also one of the sunniest, most accommodating humans on the planet. Her soft Australian accent makes my brain tingle, and not for nothing, she has a pair of the most glorious breasts I have ever had the privilege to witness. If you enjoy lying down with us, become a patron of the Horizontal Arts. Patreon is a website that crowdsources income for artists. It can make it possible for me to continue making independent, uncensored, ad-free homemade radio. For $20 a month, you'll get 2 tickets to a live recording. Lots of other perks on patreon.com/horizontal with Lila. patreon.com/horizontal with Lila. In the first half of our episode together, Bryony and I talk about Catholic schoolgirl skirts, the time I slapped a girl, being spared sex, and going to the chapel. We got horizontal in Williamsburg in Bryony's bed. It was summertime, and though I asked her to turn off her air conditioner, there was nothing to be done about other people's air conditioners. At one point, the condensation from an air conditioner above her air conditioner began to drip, drip, drip. Ah, the sounds of summer in Brooklyn, ladies and gentlemen. You know, if I were you, I'd come lie down with us.
If I were a man, I would have a hard-on for your accent. It's so good. I love listening to your podcast just to hear your voice. I mean, it's great on its own merits, but just to hear your voice is so delicious.
I think that's the rule outside of Australia, because inside Australia, I think people would think, oh, she's just this bogan talking about sex.
What? A what?
Just a bogan.
Bogan?
Like a bogan. Don't you know what a bogan?
No.
A bogan is like, how do you put it nicely? A bogan is like trashy sort of person like that. But a real bogan accent is kind of like, oh, fuck yeah. Like, what you fucking gonna do about it, mate?
Oh, wow.
So it's not quite that, but I always find it amusing when people say, oh my gosh, your accent. I love your accent. Thinking, oh my gosh, if only they knew.
That's wonderful. Grant says something like that, right? Where he's like, I have gotten more attention than I rightly should get because of this accent and the fact that I'm in America.
Exactly. I always say, if you're a foreigner and you come to at least New York, you get 10% hotter. immediately if you have an accent.
Absolutely. Well, maybe it depends on what kind of accent.
Yeah, okay. Australian,
Australian, definitely. British. Absolutely. French.
Spanish, maybe.
Maybe.
Aussies.
So you were born and raised in Australia.
Yes.
And what do Australians learn about sex? Do you have sex ed?
We do. It's on par with America.
So just reproduction and
Yeah.
menstruation.
I like the way you say it. Menstruation. Menstruation? I don't know the right way to say that. We didn't get taught how to say it. We just got the picture of like the ovaries and, drop down. But yeah, it was very basic. It was an anatomy lesson. There was never any talk about, definitely not about communication or consent at that point. And I went to an all-girls school, private school. We had to wear ties and uniforms. I once got a detention for eating an ice cream in the street in my uniform.
No. Because it was so suggestive?
I don't even know. Yeah. Why would you give a young girl a detention for eating an ice cream in a uniform? You weren't allowed to be seen eating outside the school in your uniform.
No. Really?
Yeah. I hope they changed
it. Was about eating?
Mm-hmm. Eating outside the school in your uniform.
Because where I immediately went to was just like I got in trouble for wearing spaghetti straps on my tank tops in high school. And I was in Florida for high school. It was sometimes 104 degrees and we would be wearing spaghetti strap tank tops because it is so hot. And we would have to cover up with a cardigan when we went outside to go from class to class in order to not get a detention. And so that's where I immediately went, that it's not okay for a girl to be licking anything while wearing her.
You will not eat a banana outside the school grounds in your uniform. Yeah, I always thought that was crazy. So it was pretty conservative school. And I think on the whole, Australia's pretty conservative in their attitudes towards sex. I feel like part of it is definitely the British influence, where you don't talk about these things, and very, until recently we had the White Australia policy, like very stitched up, which I'm not gonna explain that very well.
Can you explain it badly?
Can I Google it? But basically wouldn't let people into Australia. So there's a lot of just uptightness in Australia, as open and lackadaisical and, this Aussie larrikin that we have. There's also a lot of sort of pain about talking about things, death, sex and money, right? The three things you can't talk about, or maybe politics too. But these are the sort of things that we didn't talk about or get taught about. And so growing up in that sort of environment, if you're not talking about communication and relationships, dating didn't exist. I didn't really get to go on dates till I came to New York.
That's what I wanted to know about, what dating's like and how it's different in Australia.
Well, dating in Australia was basically like, okay, first of all, going out to meet the guy that you were going to date. And this was pre-Tinder era, so we're going back 10 years ago. You would go out to the pub, you would have a few beers, you would be over one side of the bar. And like most of the guys will be over the other. You'll be talking with your girls and you have a couple of drinks, a couple more drinks, maybe make eyes with one guy. He's really cute. And at the end of the night, the guy would come up to you, be like, "You're hot, wanna fuck?" And that was it.
That's it?
And that was the game. That was the date. That was it. There was no date.
You would go out together? You just go home with them?
Go home. They were usually part of the same friendship group, or somehow you knew them maybe. Slept them, a few times, and then suddenly you guys were boyfriend and girlfriend. There was no concept of dating. Dating was a thing I saw in the movies where guys and girls went out for milkshakes in American diners.
Right.
But I remember being so elated when I arrived in New York, and this was like one of my New York moments, right? I was walking out of the subway, and I remember this guy, street talking, whatever, like, "Hey, baby, you want to go on a date?" And me, it was like the first time in New York, like that show, what's that show with Kimmy or someone in New York?
Yes, The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
And I turned around and I was like, "A date? Yes, how wonderful. And now I'm like, shut up, no date for you. But I was so excited that dating existed here, I think, which was the opposite to so many people that were so beaten up by New York dating culture. For me,
Jaded.
I was just like, oh, this is the best. Because dating wasn't a thing.
And
so.
did you go on a date with
No,
Mr. Street Guy?
I think I was so delighted, but I also shocked myself. I was like, oh my God, I probably shocked him at the time. What?
I love that you said yes.
I was like, how
How
wonderful.
nice of you to ask.
Like, a date? Is this how this thing works around here? It's true. The movies were right.
The movies were right. Before we get too far away from school, I wanted to ask if you wore skirts. Like
Skirts,
the little pleated,
and we'd roll them up.
Catholic school.
Yeah, roll them up so that, they were always, you had to put them like at knee height, but we'd roll them up to show them like mid-thigh, and you'd have the, knee-high socks.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So there was
the same?
so that there would be a gap. Mm-hmm. I did not have the same. But did you get measured? I heard some people got measured from the knee to the hem of the skirt, and if it were shorter than X inches, then they got like a beating.
Oh wow! No, we didn't. We just had to have them resting on our knees.
Okay.
And it always felt so dorky.
Yeah.
So we'd just like roll them up. As soon as we got out the gates, we'd roll them up, and then we'd buy ice creams.
Which is when you got in trouble.
I still can't believe that. So silly.
I only got one detention as I can recollect, ever. And it was because, so when I was in high school, I loved the Renaissance Fair. And anybody who hears that who's American will laugh because it's considered so dorky. I loved it. Do you know what it is?
No, tell me.
So it's this festival where they set up a sort of Renaissance village, right? And you've got the
Oh my gosh.
Yes, the place where they sell the turkey legs, and you've got the flower, you've got somebody braiding hair, and you've got the flower wreaths, and you've got the different roles of the king and the queen and the court and the peasants, and and your first year when you're an apprentice, which would be a non-paid performer, right? When you're an apprentice, you have to play a peasant.
Oh my gosh. It's a class system to the Renaissance Fair here.
So ridiculous. But I had so much fun. And that year I was 15. And I just was totally enamored with this guy who I think was 30. Wow. Yeah. And either that, he was in his late 20s. And I was totally enamored with him. He was a professional actor. He worked at Disney. He was
the ultimate.
Right. Of course. I was in Florida.
Yeah.
Right. And
What did you do?
he played the Archbishop of Canterbury, and it was this sort of foppish thing who was totally inappropriate, totally sexually inappropriate, this Archbishop. Right? So it'd be like,
Oh.
Domine Padre, Spirito, Spirito Santo. Oh, you look so good. It's like so he played this kind of ridiculously
Sexy or sexual.
sexualized character, yeah. And I was just enamored of him, and we would go for walks together and talk, and he gave me a CD of like beautiful piano music, which I listened to for years after that. And we talked about the fact that we were attracted to one another. And towards the end, there was a kind of cast party. And I went, and I was so excited to have the opportunity, right, to not be on duty, to not be performing, and to be able to be with him. And it was also very fun for me because I was at this performing arts high school, and I wasn't really in the group. Mm-hmm. And so this was a group of people who were older than me. I felt more comfortable anyway with people who were much older than me, and they took me under their wing, and they treated me like their kid sister in general. And I kissed him at this party, and I was over the moon. And then this girl that I was ostensibly friends with, I found out, also kissed him.
No.
And I was livid. I can only recall one other time that I have been that livid. And
What did you do?
Well, I came to school the next day.
Hang on, she was at school with you too.
She was at school with me. Yeah. And she was, I think, maybe 1 year younger. And she was coming out of our acting teacher's classroom. And I slapped her across the face.
Amazing.
And I have never done that before or since.
Oh, wow.
I was
Fury.
so she knew how much I just dreamed of this man. What's terrible is that I was really mad at her. I don't remember being as mad at him, right?
Why do we always get mad?
That's a terrible double standard.
Yeah.
But I was, 15 years old and indoctrinated in our culture, and I got detention. I was sent to detention. I don't know if somebody saw it or maybe they heard it, but I was sent to detention. That's the only time.
What did she do after you slapped her? She's shocked?
She was totally shocked.
She didn't know what to do.
And then I can't remember what happened right after, but she was shocked. I was shocked. I shocked myself. Yeah, that I would go so far. I can't remember if I had premeditated it, if I had planned to hit her. I can't remember. But I do remember the moment and the place where we were. I can place us in the school right outside of my acting teacher's classroom.
Wow.
So that was the only time I got detention.
Was that the only time you slapped?
Yeah, that I can recall. That's the only time I've ever slapped anybody. Slapping across the face to me is a huge deal. I don't like it in sex. I had a lover who did these like little playful slaps as part of how he liked to dominate. I was like, I don't like that. Don't touch my face. You can touch my face, but don't hit my face. It's a hard line for me. I don't have a problem with other people liking it, but to me it feels degrading.
Yeah, I was going to say, it feels disrespectful, doesn't it? Either that or what a distraction.
Right.
Trying to focus here. Stop.
Wait a minute.
Is there a fly on my face?
I'm not into humiliation. Like he liked that. Name calling and humiliation was part of his kinkiness, and I don't like it. It's not for me.
Is that why you didn't end up
continuing with him? That, by the way, this was not the same guy. This is many, many years later. Okay. I only kissed that guy when I was 15. He didn't take advantage of me, actually, and he could have. He very well could have. I would have slept with him gladly. And he said to me, I could step into this with you, and at some point, I think you would regret it, and you would blame me for losing these years of your life in which you could be exploring, and I can't do that to you.
So he even said years. So he was projecting not just sex, but this relationship that you guys would have for years.
Was projecting a relationship that would maybe take me through to college or something, and then I would resent him for all the experiences that I hadn't had throughout the rest of my high school life and the beginning of my college life. So I thought that was very interesting. And actually, it wasn't the only time that I was, and I will use the word spared by a man, that I think I really would have wound up bruising myself on them, becoming very, very hurt, getting into a situation with an addict or somebody that I really didn't want from this vantage point of 34-year-old Lila, that I really would not want for my teenage self. And they said, I can't do it. You're too pure. They would actually say that. You're too pure. I can't sleep with you. I can't do this to you. I think later on you're going to realize that I did something good for you. But I was mad at them then.
I had the same thing happen to me.
You did?
But not the projection of years, just the sparing, which I've never heard that term, but it's perfect, of sex. When I was 18, I backpacked around the world, and for a lot of the time I was by myself, and I worked in this hostel in Rome, and I had 24-hour shifts where I wasn't allowed to leave the hostel. It was a legal hostel on this floor of an apartment building in the Vatican City, so highly illegal. We used to have the cops come and check our passports and stuff, and it was just basically a big floor with different rooms and bunk beds in them. And anyway, it was me and this other young girl, and we were 18 running this hostel, And we used to do all these silly things like dress up in cat costumes all day because we were going crazy. We couldn't leave, and have like these parties. But
Oh, that's wonderful.
I remember being spared and this like really hot, sexy, like American guy who came in who was maybe 10 years older. And, you're backpacking, they're sleeping their way around Europe for the summer.
Sure.
And, I really hadn't properly slept with someone before.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is it. This is my moment.
Yeah.
I'm ready. Of course, that's looking back, that probably freaked him out. But he was just like, no, can't do this with you. I'm sorry. And, we were like working up to the moment. He's like, I'm sorry. As soon as he realized that I, hadn't had sex before, he's like, oh, no, this isn't for me. I don't want to carry this around with me. I wonder how many people have been spared.
Wow. That's why I'm so surprised. I've never heard anybody else tell me a story like that. And I had several times. Another notable time for me was, so I was in college and I didn't have sex until it was my sophomore year. And I think it was the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. And I was waiting tables at the Village Underground, which was a music venue.
Sounds so cool.
I was cocktail waitress, but I was 18, and I didn't know until then that you don't have to be 21 to serve. You can be 18 to serve,
interesting.
but you have to be 21 to drink, which was
That's confusing.
very strange, I thought. But I didn't care. I don't like alcohol anyway. It didn't make a difference for me, although I could have gotten it then, right, as I was working. So I somehow met some people, maybe while I was working, because that happened a few times, and wound up at this palatial apartment in Tribeca, which was 2 floors, and the top floor had a greenhouse, and it was incredible. And apparently it was passing hands between Gus Van Sant and Ben Affleck, and it was before Ben Affleck had moved in, and there were screeners for Gus Van Sant, the Academy voters movies. And I was already kind of seduced by the apartment, seduced by the place. But there was this young actor, not a successful one in terms of in the business, but had friends. And this, I guess, was one of his friends. And you remember he told me this story about going to visit Joaquin Phoenix. Apparently he lived in the same building, and apparently he only had one burrito in his fridge or something, and he saw the guy, because this guy was really a kind of a starving artist, eyeing the burrito. And he's like, hey man, you hungry? And the guy said, oh, I can't take your last burrito. And he said, it's fine, please eat. So I can't believe I was charmed by this, but I was 19.
That was it.
No, 18. And I was totally charmed by it. And he was beautiful. He was beautiful. He had these gorgeous blue eyes and this tousled brown hair, and he had this beautiful chest, like a soccer player. He had a soccer player physique, which is the kind of body that I really go for and lust over and admire. And the people who were there kind of coupled off, and I got to go to bed with him, right? And the guys had been doing cocaine. I'd never been around drugs, really. I'd heard about people doing drugs. I'd been around people smoking pot, but I'd never been around people doing harder drugs. And he had been apparently taking a fair bit of cocaine. And I said, no, thank you. And then we were in bed together, and I curled up on his chest, and I was listening to his heartbeat. And remember, I'm 18 years old, and I'm feeling very romantic, right? And I said, wow, your heart's beating really fast. And he said, you know why? And I thought it was because of me.
You are pure.
Oh my God. I thought it was because of me.
That's adorable.
It took probably years for me to realize he was coked up out of his mind. Oh, and
that's so wonderful.
And then I wanted to sleep with him.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in this amazing place, and he was so sexy, and I was so attracted to him.
And his heart's beating fast.
And his heart's beating
Nowhere.
fast.
He's
I
in
know.
love.
It's so terrible.
And he couldn't.
And he found out that I was a virgin, and he said, I can't do that. It wouldn't be right.
Mm.
And it wouldn't. I would have been so sad.
Mm. Have you ever been in the opposite situation and spared someone?
Not with a virgin. I don't think I've, to my knowledge, ever come close to sleeping with a virgin. Have you?
I don't think so. I'm trying to remember.
What my mind went to, and then I was trying to look for evidence of this in my memory, was there ever a time when somebody wanted to cheat with me and I said no?
Mm.
Because there's certainly times that I didn't say no.
And that's the time. That's the spare. That's the spare.
I would consider that sparing. If somebody wanted to cheat with you and you said, I really don't think that it is a good idea. Or if somebody was in a super emotional, fragile state and you're like, I don't think it's right now. But I can't think of a time.
You've spared someone. I don't think I can either.
I have.
Other than maybe, and it's not sparing them when you're not attracted to them.
No.
But you know, when you spare someone, you're like, it's that classic, like, yeah, we're just better friends. Like, I don't want to ruin it. Let me spare you from getting involved.
When you're actually attracted to them?
No.
Right.
I'm just telling them.
No, that's
yeah.
It's not.
Which
that's,
we've all done too, haven't we?
Yes.
Most of us.
Well, in an attempt to
protect someone's feelings. And
right. Which usually backfires, right?
Totally.
So you, before then, what was your first knowing that your vulva was pleasurable?
Oh, I was trying to think about this. Probably more than most people. Because I've listened to, I think it was a video of different women and when they first started to masturbate.
Yeah.
And I was trying to remember when was the first time for me. And there's women that have described vivid memories to me when I have asked this question about I was sitting and watching cartoons and suddenly, was that on your podcast?
Yes,
started rubbing up against the couch.
Jana.
Yes, I remember that. I have such a good visual of her first time masturbating. I don't have a good visual or in memory of mine. Yeah, of like looking back on me and when did that happen? When? Why don't I remember that? Why don't I remember that moment?
I don't remember the first time either. I do remember when I started engaging in it regularly and what I did, but I don't remember when it came about or how I learned about it or if I rubbed up against something and that felt good or...
Because I didn't even know about masturbation for so long. I think, when did I ever...
I suppose, what's the earliest memory you can track of that?
My earliest memory is up in my bedroom, I'm masturbating and...
Under the covers? Over the covers?
Under the covers, and my mum walks in. I remember being mortified. And she just acts like nothing's happening. And I'm like, oh my God, just having a nap. Or however I sounded at like, I don't know, 8 years old. Just having a nap. And she goes back downstairs. And that maybe because that was such an embarrassing moment.
Wow.
It just like seared through this whole memory of like first discovering the pleasure aspect of it.
Right. So that first memory is intertwined with embarrassment.
Total embarrassment. Oh my gosh.
But how did you know to be embarrassed? That it's something to be embarrassed about?
Yeah. Exactly. How did I?
Indoctrinated with shame so early.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how. Like, did we pick it up at school? Are there times maybe when we didn't know there was anything wrong and we touched ourselves at school and then we got a slap on the wrist or
okay,
we're told that it was
bad? I think
bad?
I actually just remembered. That's so weird. Okay, here's a memory. I remember we were on holidays in Fiji or something and I discovered this book called War of the Roses. Have you heard of it?
No.
I think it's about a family that split up. I'd love to know what it's about now. And I remember there were some sex scenes in the book. And that was where I got turned on. And I don't remember masturbating, but I'm sure I did. I'm sure this is the moment. And I used to run and hide and read this book, War of the Roses.
War of the Roses.
I don't know, it was this old book in this Fijian villa. And I'd run off. But that's like I don't know, I just started to read. I don't even know how I read some of that stuff.
I was a huge reader as a kid. And I'll bet I came across something. Just now, as you were saying the book, I had a memory of Judy Blume. And I think that's how a lot of American girls learned about their bodies.
Yeah. Did she have sexy stories, or were they about puberty or young girls?
I think they were about puberty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. It's so funny, isn't it? Because it's so subtle. It's just like today, if we think about that, kids are just on Snapchat or seeing things at 9 years old. What we were doing at 9 years old was finding these books.
Right.
Using our imagination.
The way I hear my friends or close acquaintances that are parents who are liberal and sex positive, the way that they teach their children is they make it what is appropriate is place specific. So they say, we don't touch our vulvas at the dinner table. If you want to go into your room. Like, nope, we don't do that here. That's a private activity, which is certainly a lot less shame-based than don't do that. You're not supposed to touch yourself, you know. Oh my God, the war against masturbation that has been going on for so long is so ridiculous to me. Because if you don't want people to have sex, for goodness sake, are you not going to
let them have a
pleasure
maz.
themselves?
You know, one thing I learned this past year in sex therapy school was about how sexual babies are and how babies get erections all the time and touch themselves all the time. And that's just like they're in their natural state, like making sense of the world and looking at the world around them. And so much of the shame can be traced back to even being a baby when you're looking up at your mum and kind of she's mirroring, she's looking back at you, providing reassurance about what you're experiencing and maybe showing a smiley face or a sad face when things aren't right. But when something sexual happens, baby gets an erection, the mum doesn't know what to do, freaks out, puts the baby down somewhere. Baby's now alone. The baby learns that when sexual things happen, it's alone, isolated, it's abandoned, or maybe she yells at it or shakes it. And so much of that trauma we have around just feeling sexual, it can be traced back to that, which is your primary caregiver and how they react. And of course, we don't really tell parents what to do in those instances either. So
I've never heard anybody say, oh yes, babies are super sexual and will touch themselves. I've never heard anybody say that. But of course, right? If all you're doing is exploring and just feeling into your body, you're just gonna touch anything you can touch.
All these new sensations and you know, the wind blowing past you is like a new feeling. You're out in the world the first time, like all these new things. And of course, like that's arousing.
And you
life.
Go towards what feels good. I had a yoga teacher colleague who called it the hedonic impulse. You want to move towards that because it's pleasurable. And then if you're censured so early and then if it's repeated, oh my God, so much.
So even before you get to the parents saying, hey, that's not the place to do it, you have this whole thing about this is a naughty thing I'm doing. Or this isn't right.
This isn't okay.
But I'll do it anyway.
Right. Under the covers late at night.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I was just thinking about if I ever went through like a period of like intense masturbation. Like someone was telling me about masturbating for money.
What?
Have you heard about this?
No. You mean like webcam girls?
No, like masturbating to bring money into your life and the pussy
like
power.
sex magic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Tell me. You know about sex magic?
Not a lot.
I don't know about sex magic. We need someone on your podcast who knows about sex magic.
Oh, I have a couple who I could go to, a couple people. One is the sex writer Sophie St. Thomas, and this sort of witchy, coven of women that practice this. So as
Together?
far as I know, I think it's separately. As far as I know, it is ritualizing the experience of pleasure, lighting candles, setting an intention, stoking the energy of your sexuality with the belief that that energy is so powerful that when you deliberately stoke it, people will feel it, that it will draw the things that you want to you, and not just a partner, but a book contract. Or that's an article that I read. I think it was by Kristen Corvette, who calls herself the editrix-in-chief of Slut something.
Slutever?
Not Slutever, that's Carly Shortino.
Slutty girl problems?
No, that's not it either. I'll figure it out. I'll put it in the show notes. But she used it to bring, I think, a favorable book contract to her.
Fascinating.
And part of it is the self-pleasure, right? To raise the energy, to make it more powerful and more potent and more intense. And certainly sexual energy is incredibly powerful. If you come across somebody, and I really love sexual energy when it's somebody that I'm attracted to, right? But have you ever come across somebody that you were attracted to that you felt like, whoa, their sexual energy is actually too much. Like, I can't even handle it.
Like you're embarrassed by it because it's so much. It turns you on so much.
It turns you on so much, but like it's almost just, could you just turn the volume down a little? Like the threshold is, like it's hitting your upper limit maybe of sexiness.
Interesting. Tell me about this.
I only really even saw him from afar, but he's a musician.
That'll do it.
And I don't usually like musicians at all.
That energy.
I don't like them at all. This Nako, do you know this man? Nako Bear and Medicine for the People is his music. I met him at this, it was a play or a devised theater piece by the guy who made that movie Gasland. So it was an environmental piece about mainly fracking and anti-fracking. And so each time they performed it, and I had a friend who was in the company, each time they performed it, they had a special guest. And on the night that I went, it happened to be Nako Bear. And I looked around, almost every woman and some of the men in the room were mouths agape, just like drooling over this incredibly potent sexual energy that he was emitting. And I hadn't really experienced that kind of overwhelm. Usually because I'm so flirty, I'll meet someone. Yeah, I'll just come right to where they are and we'll have a little tete-a-tete. And
even this was too much from Ms. Lila.
Some words.
Oh my
but
gosh.
Wow. Just even being near him. And there was somebody who I have a pretty good sense of when somebody's lover is in the room and how their energy kind of wraps around their partner as a shield. Not every partner, obviously, but his partner, I could feel it pretty strongly, and I didn't approach him because of it. I said, I don't need to step into that dynamic, whatever is going on there. I don't need to insinuate myself into that. Yeah, it was really. Oh, I'm flushed.
Yeah, you are
talking about it.
Cheeks are all warmed up. So interesting. I want to experience that.
What would you do now if you did?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I guess I would run away, like you said, like you did. Like it's too much. Like that intensity, that wave.
That sort of reminded me of the episode of Sex and the City where there's the guy who's so amazing at cunnilingus, and at one point somebody says to her, "You have to let him go." He can't be contained. He can't be kept.
He needs.
You have to give him to the world.
He's a gift. If you love something, set it free.
Exactly. That was basically it. So you were 18. You were traveling. How did you get to travel the world?
Well, the short story is I always knew, when you just know, oh, I just want to go. I just was so ready to leave school at 16.
Yeah.
So I told my parents, I'm going to, once I finish high school, I'm going to travel. I'm not going to go to university. I'm going to travel first. And they were like, all right, Bryony, whatever you want, but we're not going to fund this trip. So you're going to have to figure out how you're going to do this. And I was like, fine. I had
Sure.
all the fire and energy that I needed to make this happen.
Yes,
I looked up in the
17,
newspaper because that's
16-year-old.
where you found jobs. And in the classified section, I'd finished school. Yes, awesome. I'm going to get a job. And I remember this ad in the paper for Red's Advertising, R-E-D-Z. And I thought, oh, this sounds like me. Call them up in the next day at 9 o'clock in the morning, dressed up in some of my mum's clothes. And I was so excited. I was like, I'm totally got this job. And they're like, congratulations, you've got the job. You're going out on the road today. And I was like, awesome. And it turned out I was selling phone plans door to door.
No.
And I was so good at it.
Really?
I became their top seller.
Oh my God.
And my parents were like, what the hell is going on? They would drive me out to streets in like suburban Victoria, like right out in the States. I remember one time we took tents with us and we went into a campground and camped there overnight because it was so far away. And in the morning I got up, put back on my little mum's clothes again and went out and I knocked door to door. And I loved meeting people. I loved the stories. I'd go into their homes. I'd talk to them about what are they up to today? And it was grannies and it was mums and sometimes old guys and sometimes families, whatever. Sometimes students, and talk to them and eventually sell them this phone plan, get them to switch their home phone over. And that was the point where cell phones, or mobile phones as we called them in Australia, were so new that not everyone had them.
Yeah.
And I would also do them an add-on and get them a cell phone. I was like, you need this. This is going to be like amazing.
This is the thing of the future?
This is the thing of the future. Which I didn't know at the time, but I was so good. I made all this money. It was a pyramid scheme where you got to move up eventually. You get the car and you get a team. But all I wanted to do was make this money and get out so I could go overseas. So that's exactly what I did.
And you did.
That's what I did. Wow. And that's how I got overseas.
The force of your will.
Determination. I was like, see you guys, I'm out of here. And I stayed away till the end of the year. And
Were you unhappy in your family home?
no, I was more just unhappy and just like, not unhappy, but I was just like, I want more. Very privileged, and I'd traveled and already with my parents and I was like, I want to go see more of this stuff. Like, get me out of this little box. There's more out here for me. And I wanted to go and just experience stuff, which I did. I did a bunch of dangerous stuff when I was 18.
Like what?
I mean, like when they didn't have, when I didn't book accommodation in advance and I'd rock up to a city and sleep in like a hotel lobby or convince someone, to let me sleep on their roof and like old restaurants and things, like crazy things, silly situations I got myself in. But yeah, and times where I ran out of money and worked in a hostel or did funny things. But
Did you have any siblings?
I have a brother. He lives in New York.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Older or younger?
Younger.
And did you go to school? Well, no, you went to a girls' school, so you didn't
Yeah.
go to school together.
No. But we went to primary school together.
And so you got no, well, what I'm going to call proper sex ed, right? At school. Did you get any at home?
I think the one thing that I remember that was seared into my memory is don't have sex until you're married. And this came from a line of Catholic women in my family. And even though my mum, she married her high school sweetheart and then she got divorced and married my dad. And like, it obviously had sex growing up, like with her first husband. I remember her telling me she didn't have sex till she married my dad.
What?
She'll deny it.
And she had a husband before.
She'll flat out deny it. But this is what I remember. And so I carried around a whole thing with me about not having sex till I was married. And when I fell in love for the first time at 16 with a Colombian guy, We even went to the church to get married because I was so caught up in this idea that, and this is part of the reason we didn't have proper sex, is because we needed to get married first. And of course, we went to this church. Can you imagine? Like 16-year-old girl and the Colombian exchange student.
Set the scene. What was the church like?
It was a tiny church at a beach house down, so like in a beach town, tiny beach town really, in Australia. And we found this church. I don't even know how we found it. I think I must have gone to mass there once. And we knocked on the door and asked for the priest, and he came out. Can you believe this? And we asked to get married. That's how I thought it went.
Yeah.
And that's not how it goes. And he said no, sort of, in some polite way. And must have seen these two kids and it kind of like, I don't know, somehow sent us off in some, like obviously we had homework to do or something like this. But I was so set on, being married and this being the proper thing to do before I had sex. So it largely prevented me from having a lot of sex. These beliefs that I carried around, especially about my mum not having sex till she was married to my father, which was at 30 years old.
But these Catholic doctrines, right? The Catholic kids wind up doing quote unquote everything but.
Yeah.
Right? To the point where even anal penetration, anal sex, they will do that because it's not taking their virginity, because it's not quote unquote real sex, right?
I've heard this in young kids today, like more and more so than ever. I didn't even know anal sex was a thing. Like, this is how ignorant I was.
Yeah.
We didn't, obviously, I don't know if you got taught about it at school.
No,
didn't know it was
not
a thing.
at all.
But talking to therapists today, young kids, exactly what you said, will do this instead of penetrative sex. That's the preference. Because it's not real sex.
And that's the thing, right? Considering oral sex not real sex means that if they're not thinking of it as real sex, then it's not risky. And also that leads to pretty terrible ramifications later on where maybe if penetrative sex doesn't feel good to someone, then they feel deficient in some way or broken because why can't they enjoy real sex, which is an experience that I had, or they don't think about the fact that herpes can be passed from genitals to mouth or mouth to genitals. They're not doing their research because it's not real sex. I think that also leads to the orgasm gap, right?
Totally.
I want so much to broaden our definition of what sex is.
Exactly. What is sex anyway?
In every episode of the Future of Sex podcast, Bryony asks her guest this question: what is the future of sex? I'm going to answer it. I dearly hope that the future of sex is a return to intimacy. The more robotic and technologized our sex lives become, the more we will yearn for pure, unadulterated, skin-on-skin contact, the more we will crave being seen in our stripped-down, emotional, flawed, and glorious humanity. The future of sex, I hope, will be a reclaiming of simple, bygone means of deepening sexual connection, like eye contact, like full-body contact, like stillness. To follow all things Bryony and Future of Sex, get yourself over to futureofsex.org. And now let me give credit where credit is due. This episode was edited by Bryony's Future of Sex editor, Chad Michael Snavely. Thanks, Bryony. He's great. Listen to the rest of the podcasts in Chad's catalog through chadmichael.com. My sumptuous cover art is by the illustrator Shauna Shea, whom you can hire through 99 Designs. The theme music is by newly minted Papa Alan Markley on Instagram as Plastic Cannons. Every week, I'm reading one 5-star review to thank my lovely listeners. This one, from Nebula is entitled Truffles for My Ears. Nebula writes, I can't recommend this experience enough. Lila's soothing voice is so calming that I feel like I'm horizontal with her while laying in my own bed. The sensual exchange between her and whoever the lucky horizontal guest is will leave you feeling deliciously sexy and ready to talk about naughty thoughts with your own lovers. Her work is important. It's time to normalize sex, talking about sex, and being whoever we want to be in and out of the bedroom. If you want exposure to a calm, comforting, and non-judgmental sexy space, spend your subway ride horizontal. Oh, Nebula, you glorious, luminous night matter. Thank you. To my listeners, may you have someone to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. Thank you for lying down with us.
No wonder it wasn't
Podcasting
recording.
problems.
Fuck. What?
Podcast problems. This is amazing.